Welcome to Overanalyzing Houseki no Kuni because it's consuming your soul. Spoilers for up to 105 because that is what's out at the time of the recording of this video. And let me know in the comments if you analyze something differently or have other cool ideas that I don't. Alright, so we just got to Ventricosis just revealed their actual form to Foss, and so, Ventricosis is like all the memories because Ventricosis is almost to their home of sorts. So, we are close. The scent, at least, remains unchanged. It is the same as before the Lunarians appeared. So it's interesting to talk about the talking about how like things are not changed, uh, because change is such a huge theme like throughout the story, and so it's interesting how Ventricosis says that their home hasn't changed, even though technically, like, it's completely different because no one's living on there. But yeah, which again, this is kind of reminding me a bit of like Boss on Earth when everyone's left. Uh, but it's it's different. It's different. Um, is something the matter? Let's go. You'll be able to go further once the sun goes down. Is that's not so? So again, I think this is guilt, but I also think this is Ventricus is also checking. Like that's correct, right? Because that's what my plan was, sort of thing. Um, but I do think that like there's a little bit of guilt in that of like you won't be able to go. You sure you don't want to turn back? Yeah, you won't be able to go any further once the sun goes down. And yeah, it's funny. Speaking. In the anime, I'm pretty sure this is probably the same in the Japanese version, but this is actually a pun. So, but the word for uh, the word for king in Japanese is o, and the informal version of yes in Japanese is also o, and so it's kind of funny because uh, False is just saying oh like king, and then Ventricos is like oh like yeah. Anyway, um, another thing I like is interesting about this is just that they even though Ventricos is female as far as we know. With this series, you never know, but they still call Ventricosus a king, which is something that I don't know. I kind of like, and I don't know if it really makes a difference, but like giving, like making gendered names less gendered. But it's also that in snail society, I don't know how to say their actual names, but there's like way more. I think it was like there's like way more women to like men, and that's probably why their leaders are women, um, which is very interesting. That that's they say that in the lore book. Again, like I've just called it the lore book. That's not its official name. Its official name is like Life and Creatures on like a string of numbers that is supposed to be Earth. But anyway, that's getting a little bit off topic. But they do this in Hunter x Hunter 2, where they like assign the word prince to all the children of the king in the latest arc, and uh not just prince and princess for the girls, but it makes it a lot more like uniform in terms of the saying that they're all on an equal playing field to become the king of the nation. So I don't know, it's interesting. Because they did in Japanese they do have a word for queen. So they Ichikawa purposely chose to decide to call them kings. Um, what are you? What are you? What am I? You know. But you're saying totally disgusting thing that you call cute, adorable was your true form. Um, this is my true form. I can't take this shit when I'm near home. Lore stuff. Yeah, it's so bouncy and vulgar. It's so funny. Venturosis and Foss's dialogue is hilarious. Um, anyway, uh, phew, that was a shock. So, what kind of jellyfish are you? Don't be absurd. Well, whatever. I'm glad that you can swim. Um, there was another thing I wanted to mention about ventricosis. What was it? Oh, it's interesting how Foss gains something from all the leaders of each race, and it's not expected at first because here, like Foss gets like the agate legs from ventricosis, and then Foss gets the eye from uh what's his name, Acmea, the Lunarian guy, and then later Foss gets the other eye from Congo. But it started with the Ventricosus, and it's interesting how Foss has gotten like something from every single leader of the three races. But yeah. Well, whatever. I'm just glad you can swim. Yes, you may throw that away now. So I had to I'm re-recording this video, but I made a really like it was like a 10-minute long rant about something completely I can think is completely unrelated, and I was saying like this might be unrelated when I was recording it, but like Foss not wanting to throw the thing away shows that their societies are very different. And since we don't really know much about the Snail People Society, I mainly compared Foss and the Lunarians, Foss and the Gems and the Lunarians, because the Gems are have very little resources. Like that's something that is very made clear in the lore book that I'm just calling it the lore book. Its name is too long. In the lore book that I've read, and it means that they take very good care of everything that they have. That's why they have embroider like the clothes they have, because they intend to take care of everything that they make. They recycle everything that they don't use. It's very much like that sort of society. Whereas the Lunarians have a very materialistic society, and um, they have an abundance of what seems like everything, and they have an abundance of technology, and it just shows like the difference in values the cultures have just because of the resources that are given to them. Um, and it's also like the Lunarians have a bigger population than the Gems, and it shows how a bigger population affects that as well. And I originally, in the original video, I made a huge comparison between Western and Eastern, loosely, very loosely. But in the video, I said I'm American, so I can say this about Americans. But the way that Americans treat resources is a lot different from how Singapore treats resources, for example, and Japan. Because Japan and, well, Singapore especially is a small island nation. And so, because Singapore is a very small island, I know way too much about Singapore. Don't get me started. As a small island uh, with very little resources, they really take care of everything that they have. Japan is along that side too. That's why Japan is very strict on their recycling, because they have to really take care of every single resource that they have there. Meanwhile, in America, you know, we have an abundance of space, an abundance of population, an abundance of kind of an abundance of resources in some things, and we've become wasteful about it. This feels harsh. I'm allowed to say this because I'm American. That sounds wrong, but that's kind of what I was going on about for here. Not saying it's like a bad thing, but it's just interesting to see culturally how that's so different. In like, it still upsets me that the recycling system here is not that good. Like, it really just shows like the difference in care of materials and resources that the Gems have and that the Lunarians have. I'm gonna go back to here and not as something real life. We not real life examples, but yeah, it's just interesting. And another thing I related this to is you could also say this about people in their society as well, because there's only it says 28, but there's only like 26 gems. So each person is very valuable to the community because there's not a lot of people. Because there's value comes in manpower. This is I don't know what conversation this is now, but also I'm sorry that I say all the time. I've been trying to break that habit. But Foss, even though Foss isn't that useful, uh, they are still valued by the community. Like the community still seeks them out when they are lost, when they do something wrong, and they still bring them back and they still repair them. And the reason for that is because there's everyone is so valued in the community just because of the fact that there's not that many people. Whereas with the Lunarians, like it's not that way. And with the snail people, like as I mentioned in the last video, when Ventricosus was mentioning livestock, not maybe it wasn't in the last video, like 2 videos ago. Oh, I just found it as soon as when Ventricosus mentioned livestock. What the Lunarians are doing is they're taking the snail people's prisoners, they're criminals, the people who are valued least in society, because that's what criminals are. If the Gems had more people, Foss would be Foss would definitely be in jail. If they had a jail in the Gem Society, we all know Foss would be in jail. So it's just kind of interesting that Oh, wait, actually, never mind. I don't. I don't want to think of emotional damage creeps in at the memory when the gems invented a jail. Anyway, um, laughing because it's painful. Anyway, so when Ventricosis says livestock, that's what they're talking about is on the moon that they take their prisoners and the people that are valued less in society. And they can do that because they have a surplus of people, if you want to put it that way. And Ventricosis, like, because Ventricosis grew up in the environment, Ventricosis doesn't see these things as more valuable, and it kind of shows that like the more abundance of something, the less you value it. I don't know how I got onto this. Again, over analysis is taking us places, but yeah, the overabundance of something, and that can even extend to people, makes things less valuable. Um, so that's why, like, what's the point in rehabilitating your criminals if you have an abundance of people? Is kind of how this is going. I do not expect to talk about this today. I'm sorry, but that's kind of interesting because, like, of course, they still try to find a purpose for Foss and a job for Foss because they, even though Foss is a handful and a handful and a half, they still Foss can still provide value just by existing. They also don't have to feed Foss because they're immortal, so that kind of helps. But yeah, whereas with Ventricosis, those things aren't as valuable because that leads into their society and what they value, and people aren't valued when they are seen as less than in a society. Oh man, this is going so many wrong places. But uh, that's kind of where the story is going, is that people aren't valued when they're seen as less than in a society, when they cause problems for other people. And in the wrong society, that can twist uh, things. And it's kind of hard to like toe the line of like what's acceptable and what's not. And that's kind of how all of our societies get kind of messed up nowadays. Like with because the justice system in any society is a really complicated thing, and it's really hard to know to reform someone or when are they past the terms of you think reformation is possible. And man, I don't want to go back. Never mind. I'm not going to make this political. Not political, but like again, I see this. I don't know. It's kind of everywhere because there are some places where they really make an effort on reforming prisoners, and there are some places where they don't, and there are some places where nudge nudge America, America, and there are some places where like holding people in cells is seen as like a business, and uh, and it's kind of awful how people are kind of treated as livestock in that way, and how there is no reformation for those people, and it isn't seen as valued to reform those people because there's an abundance of people in the society or an abundance of people coming in because anyway, let's move on to the next page. I don't want to talk about this. Okay. But hey, we look so much alike. I don't know all the details myself. Why do you suppose that is? You were supposed to be writing a natural history, making a hypothesis, and now you're telling. Let me think. Foss is just so adorable. Um, you've never experienced much of Ipsilon, have you? So this is interesting because I do agree with Ventricosis on this. Because it's true that like Foss does get yelled at later by Congo when they did do this, but the repercussions aren't that much. Like Foss gets yelled at and Foss loses their job, but that's really it, which I guess is still a lot for Foss, especially the fact that they just had a role given to them, but they really don't like take care of the roles or put care into the roles that they have. And so it's interesting, but like in a bunch of other situations, a lot of characters put the blame on themselves and not Foss. And so Foss doesn't really have that much discipline. Come on, your Majesty, you may have not know the details, but tell me something. But you do know something. Tell me. You are an oddly perceptive at this time, and that's Foss being curious, um, which is a good and a bad thing, according to our legend. So then we get the lore. The planet was once home to creatures known as humans. And this is the only thing that Foss remembers. And I think this is because this is the only word that Foss really had never heard up until then. And it shows that Congo hasn't, like, Congo, I guess I'll talk about that later, but Congo doesn't tell the gems what humans are. He always refers to them as those ancient creatures. And I wonder why that is. I'll think about it later. Um, they tech, and then it talks about how the humans were alive up until the like last meteor strike. They fled into the ocean, and Foss is like, "Nice work, humans." Kind of cute that Foss says that. Um, but they're still alive. I don't think animals could do that. And it's kind of interesting that Foss puts themselves above animals and stuff like that. So then it talks about how they were divided into the three races. We have the flesh, which is the and then um, we have the bone, which is the gems, who are on land. So the flesh, obviously, because they have the cycle of reproduction and death, and then the gems, because they have live long lifespans and they are on the land. Um, it's also, yeah. So that's just like, yeah, it's just like, this is merely the hazy origin story handed down by my people. I do not know the truth of it. It sounds a lot like our story. Yes, I had such resentment. Why? Because it is also said that in order to gain a pure land and region and regain its former glory, the spirit wanders in a quest to reclaim its flesh and bone, just as they do. The spirit, the Lunarians, are doing what they do because they want to go back to being humans, is what you're saying. So this is what we're made to believe at the beginning. I'm wondering if that's technically true. Because that's why they take the snail creatures criminals, and that's why they take the gems, is because they're experimenting making humans on the moon, but the experiments had not been going that well, so that's why they are now looking to make Foss into their human instead. But it's interesting to reclaim its flesh and bone. uh it's interesting how they don't how the three races at this point in time don't really want to be that unified. I do not know, but we possess our own minds. I believe it is much too late to turn back on the paths we have taken. Their thoughts are not our thoughts. They are too dreadful to understand. But as you say, we have no choice but to move forward. We might fight for ourselves and our people, but why? So, an interesting thing to note is Ventricosis and Fosk are kind of here saying that like the Lunarians are different from the two of them. Um, they are their thoughts are not our thoughts. They are too dreadful to understand, which is kind of interesting to put them that way. But another thing to note is that the Lunarians that are left are also kind of the criminals and the outcasts of the Lunarians, because they're the ones who were forced to fight in that pit for like thousands of years. And so, why do we have to fight? It's also interesting that like Foss is now questioning why they have to fight, as if it's something that Foss didn't want to do in the first place. If what you're saying is true, then the spirit was part of the people too. We were all one, right? Who can say? But when I was on the moon, what I felt is that while the Lunarians have no particular enemy, they take pleasure in war, and their thirst for battle is never satisfied. I have a vague suspicion that their unfocused relentlessness exists because that is the sort of creatures humans were. So this is interesting because this is how Ventricosis sees humanity. Um, so Congo sees humanity as something good, and he raises up the gems in how he thinks humanity acts. And it shows that like he views humanity in a positive light. Ventricosis sees humanity as how the Lunarians are in a negative light, and the Lunarians, I think, just see. I guess, well, we know that the Lunarians see humans as a more vengeful spirit. Um, and those two different views of what a human are kind of conflict with the story. Because Congo tries to mold Foss into the human that he thinks humans are. And Acnea is doing the same thing. Congo sees humans as a good thing, as something that is. Congo sees humans as a positive thing, And Acmea sees humans as a negative thing, even though Congo still puts down humans as like those primitive creatures. I think Congo's trying to make humans and better, is what he's trying to do. Whereas Acmea is trying to break Foss into what he thinks a human is, which is a broken person. And so those are kind of like the competing viewpoints that are happening. Um, and it's also interesting how we talk about how Foss gets more Lunarian as the story gets on, in accordance with the story. Like, Bort calls Foss a Lunarian at some point, and Lunarians are described as they take pleasure in war, and their thirst for battle is never satisfied. I have a vague suspicion that their unfocused relentlessness exists because that is the sort of creature humans were. And of course, the Lunarians think humans are vengeful. And so it's just crazy to hear this and then see little Foss and then remember what happens to little Foss. And then, you get sad. In that case, I think we've changed for the better. And that's another thing, change. We can work things out with or without them. Yes. So it's interesting that Foss says that we've changed for the better, because that's exactly what Congo is trying to do. And it also shows that Foss sees change in a positive light. Yes, you may be right. This yes right here, because Ventricosis is still working with the Lunarians at this moment. So, yeah. You have arrived. I'm exhausted. Not far, you said. Not far. Like, showing that, like, Ventricosis kind of lied. Still, this is your home. It shows that Foss sees it as worth it. There's nothing here. Oh, that's it for me. I can't move. I'm gonna lie down. And now Foss is completely, like, far away from the sun, and completely isolated. Let me know when you're ready to go back. Just as you care about Cinnabar, I do. Just as you care about Cinnabar, I too have someone I care about. This is Ventricosis explaining in quick words why they're about to portray Foss. And Foss basically betrayed the gem's trust when Foss went into the ocean and stole all the stuff to go into the ocean. And so Foss and Ventricosis aren't that different. Like, I've been also pointing out like how they're similar later on in the story later. And this is also the first time Foss learns of what betrayal is, and Foss is like, I'll take notes. But this is Ventricosis justifying what they're about to do. And I think Foss like later realizes that like if it were something that were to help Cinnabar, like Foss could see them doing this too, and that's why they forgive them, is because Foss sees themselves in Ventricosis, which is interesting because that's why Foss forgives them. And I wonder, I need to make a video on like forgiveness in the series because it's an interesting concept. Oh, this is such a cool panel, an extremely good panel. I love the like lines and how they go out and how they attack Foss's legs. It's so great. Then we have Ventricosis up there, obviously, and the full page spreads are just brilliant. All right, moving on. We have Foss falling. And it's interesting here to note that Foss and Ventricosis have gotten more even. Like, originally it was Ventricosis like above in the frame for a lot of it, but as the panels go on, they're looking at each other closer. Even here, Ventricosis goes down to talk to Foss face to face, and here they're set equal importance in the panels. And then it kind of shows like when we get to here, like even like again they're equal, their faces are equal in the panels, like looking at the same thing. Even though Ventricosis is up high, it still looks like they're talking right next to each other. And I think this shows, like again, equals in the panels, that they're not that different. That they have a lot more in common than is thought about. This is in exchange for some name, Aculeus. I read that perfectly as always. And this is Ventricosis' Cinnabar. This is who Ventricos is doing it for, and that's what Ventricos was explaining to Foss. That's interesting. So let me know if you have any other points about this. And I think that's everything I had. I hope I didn't forget anything. Again, let me know in the comments. It's also just so beautiful. The artwork. I know that's why I got into this series. Is because the artwork is so good. And now look at me. But like, I really love this one too. because it kind of just shows Foss's personality, and them entering the water is such a cool like effect that like Ichikawa was able to do here. It's so beautiful. This story is so beautiful and happy. Anyway, we will be doing chapter 10 next time. Thank you for watching. Bye.